And putting up with me once again. We do have one other director of Thor with me, Alistair Middleton. Can you raise your hand, please, Alistair? Can you ask him the hard questions? I reckon it's his turn. Here is Molly Hill, the hill itself. People used to think that Molly Hill was named because there's molybdenum in the project. It's actually named after an Aboriginal woman called Molly, and that is a sacred site. What Molly went through for that site to become sacred, I don't know. It probably shouldn't bother to find out. Our business is tungsten, it's molybdenum, and it's copper. In the case of tungsten and molybdenum, these are low volume, high value commodities. Copper, everybody knows about copper. Copper's about $6,500 a tonne. Tungsten's about $27,500 a tonne, and molybdenum's not far behind it. These are high value commodities. What's tungsten all about? Tungsten's the hardest metal there is. If you think of a piece of steel or a piece of really hard rock and you say that's pretty hard, but you want to cut it, you want to bend it into shape, or you want to drill through it, you need something harder than that, and to do that you must use a little bit of tungsten, either coat it on top of what you're doing with it or mix it in with it. It is very, very hard. It's also very heavy. It's about the same weight as gold. Molybdenum, we don't talk about that in this slide, but molybdenum is used in stainless steel. The higher quality stainless steels have more moly in them than those of a lesser quality. So if you want a really, really good stainless steel, there'll be lots of moly in that. I won't talk about what copper is used for. I don't have time, and I think you all know by now. Our flagship project is Molly Hill. And Molly Hill is what the company was founded to do in about 2004, and it sits in not far from the middle of Australia. It's the ingredients for a good mining project are high grade, close to infrastructure, near the beach, and close to transport. Well, we've got one of those things. We've got high grade. It's a long way from anywhere. We've got to fly the workforce in and out. We have to generate our own power. That costs money. The reason we still have a project is we have quite a high grade deposit. And the things to focus on in the feasibility study that I'd really like you to think about. One is the cost of getting this thing into production, $43 million US. That's not a big lump of money. It is a bit more than Thor have right now, I have to admit. The other thing is the operating cost of producing our tungsten concentrate, or our scheelite concentrate, is $90 US per metric tonne unit, which is 10 kilograms of WO3. Now, the current price is $275. There's a bit of margin for things to go wrong and for us still to make some money. What we have by way of resources, and these, as I said earlier, these numbers don't look all that big. You know, you've got grades of 0.28% tungsten, 0.13% moly. But this stuff's worth $27,000 a tonne. You don't need huge grades to have quite a profitable business. In our reserve, we've got 3,500 tonnes. That doesn't sound like much either. 3.5 million tonnes. I'm sorry, 3,500. At a similar grade. That's 7 years mine life as an open pit. We have an underground life after that, and we have some satellite resources that we'll talk about shortly. The feasibility study for Molly Hill has all these big numbers on it. The thing I'd like you to focus upon, this line through here is our cost, our annual costs. The bars are our revenue. The first couple of years are pretty spectacular. Two reasons for that, essentially one reason for that is that the grade of tungsten in the top 50 metres of this deposit are quite high. They are, in fact, they're very high, and we get our money back, our investment money back, in 18 months on these cash flow projections. After that, in the third year, the number does fall down again. The revenue falls back because we had to do a pit cut back and we put through a low-grade stockpile. We've got a strategy for that, but that's how the study looks right now. And if we focus in on it more closely, we have a challenge. We've got to lift this bar up here, and we've got to move this line out there to go from 7 years to more like 17. The opportunities are in some underground production, Bonya copper nearby, and some other satellite resources of tungsten. The underground opportunity is, this is a big complicated slide. The thing to notice down here is down here below the pit floor and around the bottom of the pit floor is 1 million tonnes of resource that has been assessed by our engineer as using normal underground mining costs as being profitable. It's not in the ore reserve right now. There's 2 or 3 years of underground mining life at the end of the open pit. Below that, down here, this ore body continues on for quite a while. We're constrained by how much drilling we've done, but the magnetic high on this goes down about 1.2 kilometres. The next thing, and the thing that really gets me excited, is Bonya. 30 kilometres from Molly Hill is a tenement we call Bonya, on which there are 13 outcropping tungsten deposits. I identified that, or we identified that, and who had them in August 2012. And I'm either a very poor negotiator or I'm a very stubborn person. It took me till 2018 for us to get equity in that tenement. The interesting thing, Craig mentioned earlier on some work being done by Dave Ransom at the Woodner project in South Australia. He wrote the last report on the stuff at Bonya in 1978. That's how long any work has been done on this project, or since work has been done on this project. As I said, there are 13 outcropping tungsten deposits. There's a small copper resource, and over here is quite an interesting vanadium deposit, and there'll be more on that at some stage as we learn more. We're going to start drilling at Bonya probably late next week. We got clearance from the Aboriginal Areas Protection Authority earlier on this week and announced that. We'd be drilling there now, but about the time we got the clearance, the tail end of Cyclone Trevor dumped 6 inches of rain on the ground, and we've got to wait till it dries out before we can get access to it. But we're really excited about that. We'll be drilling in the next week or so, and we expect that by late June, there's half a chance we will have additional resources at Bonya that will provide extra feed through to Molly Hill and extend the life of that operation considerably. This is a chart of where we are at our capital cost. Northland Capital, who are now part of SP Angels, put up a graph a few months ago and said this is where we are compared with all the competition for capital on the capital cost of bringing a new tungsten project into production. It's middle of the pack. Some of those on the left-hand side, you think they're probably never going to get going, but who knows. The interesting thing is on the next one, in the operating cost, this is where they said they are. Now, they were our broker at the time, so they're obviously not completely independent, but the credibility of the guy is such that one, I like the numbers, so I have to agree with him. But secondly, he's a guy who is a student of the tungsten industry, and and his work is generally well regarded. Roskill, in the last few months, put out a graph of tungsten costs, operating costs around the globe by quartile. The first quartile, the lowest cost. Not too many of us in the industry understand why it is that low and who is in there. But here we are, halfway at the halfway mark of the second quartile. That's around where you'd like to be in any sort of business. So we're low operating cost, a relatively low capex to get going, and we think we're in a pretty good place with that. Our challenge now is to get this project financed and into production. If we get this thing financed, pull a date out of the air, 30th of June, the first concentrate rolls out of the gate 12 months later. we're working very, very hard right now with our corporate advisors, agent partners here in London, on the offtake and the finance. There's two streams of activities going. One is a stream of activities with people that we know in the tungsten business and have known them for quite a few years, who are assessing the project. They want our concentrates. They like our project. We're working with those. There's a second stream where our corporate advisors have contacted the wider market and brought in a whole bunch of people who provide debt for mining developments, and also a few others who, despite our experience in the business, they knew some people we don't. Those two things are not running side by side because some are in front of the others, but I suspect that over the next couple of months we should have some pretty good news to be able to report in respect of finance and Molly Hill. Staying with tungsten, but moving across the Pacific, we'll go to Pilot Mountain in the state of Nevada. It's a couple of hours south of Reno, on the road towards Las Vegas. What we have at Pilot Mountain is the largest tungsten resource in the US. Now, the US Department of the Interior has classified tungsten as a critical mineral, a mineral critical for the United States. There is no domestic tungsten production in the United States and hasn't been for some years. If ever that becomes something they're really serious about, they're probably going to want to look at the largest tungsten resource in the US, and that's what we have here. We've got 34,000 tonnes of contained tungsten trioxide at Pilot Mountain, and this is only a part of a much, much larger story there. This resource will grow over time, but if you multiply that 34,000 tonnes by $27,500 a tonne, it comes up with a pretty big number. We've also got a bit of copper, a bit of silver, and a bit of zinc going with that. We've done a scoping study that says this is worth doing. The engineers threw some very large cost numbers at it to try and kill it. Didn't quite manage to do that. These numbers should improve over time. Where are we at? We've done the scoping study. We have done the first stage of metallurgical test work. We know we can produce a concentrate that can be sold. What we don't know with that work is what the flow sheet would look like well enough to cost that flow sheet, and that's what we're doing now in Guangzhou in China. We're doing the second stage of met test work, one to confirm the production of a saleable concentrate, but two to come up with a costed flow sheet. After that we can start doing some serious feasibility work. Back to South Australia, where I live, and we're now in copper. We have two copper opportunities in South Australia, and in both cases we're talking about in situ recovery of copper. We're talking about drilling some boreholes into the ground, injecting some fluid that will dissolve the copper and pumping it out from other boreholes very close by. In the case of Kapunda, the first of those, we have a grant from the Australian taxpayer for $2.85 million to help us take through to feasibility, and that would just about cover the entire feasibility cost of the Kapunda project. What we have at Kapunda is 119,000 tonnes of contained copper. These grades look low for copper mines, don't they? 0.25%. It needs to be relatively low for the in situ leaching or the in situ recovery process to work. If it's high grade stuff, there's not enough surface area for the solution to dissolve the gold in a reasonable period of time. So low grade is not necessarily a bad thing. If you've got big tonnes and low grade, you've got quite a profitable operation. The analogy for in situ recovery of copper that people may be able to identify with is Excelsior Resources, who've got the Gunnison project in Arizona. That's coming into production this year. They have said publicly, and their independent feasibility says that they will produce copper for $2,900 a tonne. That's cheap copper. If we can get somewhere close to that at Kapunda, we'll be very happy. Recently we announced that we were going to add the Kapunda project into one across the other side of about 100 kilometres to the east called Moonta, and put the two together and into a much larger copper play, and hopefully list that here in London. Now at Moonta, it's a little earlier stage. We have we don't have resources yet. We have between 200 and 300 million tonnes of stuff that we would classify as exploration targets. The stuff in, in category 1, we believe there's probably sufficient drill information on that to come up with a resource estimate on the category 1 targets. So watch this space over the next couple of weeks. There might just be a resource assessment coming out in the near term. The rest will take a little bit more work. So what happens in a picture? We drill some boreholes. Anybody who's been on a farm, particularly the Australians who have been on a farm, you'll see windmills pumping water out of the ground for stock, for general farm use. It's exactly the same technology, but in a central hole you put in we call a lixiviant, and there are a number of them. Some are acid, but some are quite benign. One we've had quite a bit of success with is a product called glycine. Glycine is a food additive. It also dissolves oxidised copper. And from holes nearby, you pump out, and you pump out the dissolved copper. Once you've got the dissolved copper in the ground, out of the ground, you can then put it through a solvent extraction and electrowin process as you would with any other copper heap leach plant. So what you have is a mining process that is very low impact. You don't have to dig a hole. You don't have to find a crusher, buy a crusher, a grinding mill, put in flotation or other circuits. You don't have a tailings dam. You can hand this land back to the farmer a couple of years later, and he can continue with his activities as if you'd never been there. That's how environmentally friendly this process is. It's also very, very cheap. Going back to the resource, particularly at Kapunda, when we first announced that we were getting involved in the copper business, the copper project at Kapunda, we announced that there were also some gold intersections at Kapunda, and haven't said much about that since. Watch this space, there might be some news about that in the next couple of weeks as well. This is where we are at Kapunda, where this year we're going into field recovery trials, pump testing, and then on to feasibility study work. At Moonta, a little earlier, working on resource estimates for category 1, and categories 2 and 3 probably need a little bit more drilling, and then we've got to go into field trials and commercialisation. This is the wall of the old Kapunda pit. That green stuff is malachite, dissolved copper. It's we took a group of investors there in June last year in the middle of the rain. A couple of them are here. Nice to see you again, fellas. You lift a boot mark in the pit, in the floor of the pit in the mud there, and it filled up with green fluid from the rain. That's how much copper. Copper is actually at toxic levels in this pit at the moment. As I said, we plan to list this new entity, Enviro Copper Limited, on a recognised exchange in the near term, and there's a fair chance that will be here in London. In the interest of time, I won't repeat I won't go through that because I think I've said that along the way as well. We announced this week also we've taken on a couple of new projects, some gold projects in Western Australia, and a uranium project in the Northern Territory, and that we had raised some funds to finance that. So there is not going to be a a capital raise in the next few months to pay for the activities associated with that. There's perhaps a little bit more on the way. There's a copper project in the Northern Territory we really like to look at. Watch this space. We're pretty excited about some of these new projects. Gold's in our DNA. We haven't had a gold project for some years. Some of this stuff in Western Australia we like the look of, and hope to start working on some of these shortly. And thanks very much for your time.